have something for you.
Ah! What was that? That was scary the way you said it.
I'm quite nervous anyways.
Don't worry.
Ha! I found an error.
Yeah, that's me. Though, this isn't gonna be a funny video. But first things first. Since I don't have the reach, I kinda have to ask you to share this video, or mirror it, or whatever you kids do these days. No need to subscribe to me, but I will name 1 or 2 people that are definitely worth keeping up with later on. So, some of you remember me giving Conan a list of errors he made on the show.
These are all the errors that you found on my show.
He didn't correct any of them, nor did he accept defeat. Actually, about a year later he claimed there still was no winner.
So far, millions and millions of challengers, not one winner. No one's ever caught us making a mistake.
Well, he hasn't stopped making mistakes, and I haven't stopped writing them down. I'm just waiting for the right time to show up out of nowhere again. Though, unfortunately, this isn't it. This is something that has to be corrected right now. And actually, I'm already quite late to the party. So, here goes. Dear Conan, on June 1st, Van Jones said this.
I think from a black perspective as a parent, we had this one little hope, this little tiny thread that there was something we could tell our children that they could do that would keep them safe from even the worst officers. If they didn't run, if they didn't talk back, if they didn't have drugs on them, if they didn't drive away, if they kept their hands on the steering wheel, if they said yes sir and no ma'am.
From a black perspective, I guess we'll dive right in. Let's talk about the cops. This is very important. I think when we discuss racism in America and whether it exists, and to what extent and how important it is, the first thing on a lot of our minds is racism from the police. And so I think we need to talk about that first. And there are some things that I don't think we always know. Tamir Rice was a black boy of about 12 who was brandishing a toy weapon, and he was shot dead. The same thing happened to a boy named Daniel Shaver not long after that. Daniel Shaver was white. Sam DuBose was shot dead by the police driving his car away from a cop. The exact same thing happened actually a little bit before that to a white guy named Andrew Thomas. Alton Sterling was a black man who reached into his waistband and reached for his wallet during an altercation with the cops, and the cops shot him dead. That was a grievous event. And the same thing actually happened around the same time to a white guy named Dylan Noble. Alton Sterling made national headlines. None of us heard about Dylan Noble. George Zimmerman said some really nasty things about unspecified little people and how they're always going around stealing things before he ended up killing Trayvon Martin. Now that was a terrible thing. Especially because a policeman said the same sort of things, including using the word fucker, before he killed a white teenager named Lauren Simpson. I could do this for 20 minutes. Though I know this probably doesn't have much weight coming from a white guy. So in the description I left you the link to the black guy I stole this monologue from, word for word. But let's go on, there's a lot more to correct in here.
It was a lynching from our point of view. I mean, just literally in broad daylight, this guy just, 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, 4 minute, 5 minute, 6 minute, 7 minutes with people begging for this guy's life.
1 minute, 2 minutes. How about the 13 minutes the police knelt the same way on Toby Timper, who by the way called the police himself because he had taken some drugs and was afraid he would hurt himself. He too said about 30 times that they were killing him.
And when it's law enforcement doing it, you really feel helpless. So that's why I think you see this incredible despair in the black community.
No, you see, the despair comes from people like you, Van Jones, spinning half-truths and telling falsehoods. The numbers don't check out. But since my conscientiousness goes to 0...
5,000 times 5,000 is 2,500,000.
I found you a German Jew I could steal the number analysis from. It doesn't get more exact than that. So this is his video. I just translated it to the best of my abilities. The central controversial subject of the current protests, or for the most part riots, in the USA is a supposedly in racism-rooted overrepresentation of blacks among the victims of deadly encounters with the police. This will be presented to you in our media the same way as it is being done in the American press. I will now, as intro to this video, in just a few minutes, beyond any doubt, prove that is nothing but a straight-up lie. And I'll do it so calmly and objectively that you can hopefully show it to your grandmas, aunts, neighbors, and the co-brother-in-law of your hairdresser. The first and by far most important question which needs to be answered when we are talking about the overrepresentation of a group in death by police cases is: how often does this group have an encounter with law enforcement, especially where the police has a reason to classify them as a threat? Violent criminals, so to speak. And the most current and objective database of violent crime broken down into race or ethnicity you can find is from the year 2017 and comes straight from the FBI. The link leading you there is in the description of the video, or if you're watching a re-upload where the link isn't denoted, you can see the direct link right here, the complete URL. Everything I say here can easily and conveniently be verified by every single one of you. And since the most current numbers about this are from the year 2017, we're going to also take a look at the statistics of death through police brutality of the same year, which is also linked in the description. Here also the Statista URL. Using the rule of proportion, we arrive at the conclusion that about a fourth, to be exact 24.7% of the people who died during an altercation with the police were black. All that while the cases listed as unknown by Statista were already removed from the overall number. So for the racist police narrative, this is the most accommodating calculation possible. If we now look at the percentage of violent crime done by black perpetrators in the same year, we see a converging diametrically opposed picture to what the media is trying to tell us. 53.1% of the perpetrators of murder and non-negligent manslaughter were black in 2017. Ergo, more than half. And 28.4% more than blacks were killed by the police. There were twice as many black perpetrators of murder and manslaughter than there were black casualties of police violence in 2017. Let's continue down the list of offenses charged. 28.7% of the perpetrators of rape in 2017 were black. That also is a distinctively higher number than the percentage of blacks killed by police in the same year. 54.3% of robberies, one of the crimes most likely ending in a violent encounter with law enforcement, were committed by blacks in 2017. Just like with murder and manslaughter, more than double compared with blacks who died because of the police. 33.5% of aggravated assault perpetrators were black. Larceny theft 29.1%. Motor vehicle theft 33.3%. Even 25.2% of the arsonists were black, which again is slightly higher than the percentage of black people whose lives ended during an encounter with the police. Overall, worth 37.5% of all violent crime in 2017 committed by blacks. 12.8% more, so more than significantly higher percentage than black fatalities caused by the police. Well, deadly for them, because that raises an interesting question. How does it look when the roles are reversed? As in, how high is the percentage of black culprits when it comes to killed police officers? The answer is also significantly higher than the percentage of black casualties. Again, looking at 2017, we arrive at 36.4%. So their representation is 11.7% higher than among the people killed by the police. Concerning the resisting arrest numbers, I couldn't find nationwide figures, unfortunately, but only the random sample kind. That's why I wouldn't exclude those from my analysis for now. Nonetheless, I have linked you a few things about that, and those as well paint, even if it's just in random samples, a damning picture. In conclusion, blacks are, when it comes to people killed by the police, massively underrepresented, even if we don't include the just mentioned police fatalities. Because of their high crime rate, which is in every category significantly higher than their share of police killings, partly even twice as high, like when it comes to murder, manslaughter and robbery. If the police were actually colorblind, we would have a 20 to 40% higher rate of black casualties than we actually do. I suspect, but now we leave the world of naked and cold facts we just heard and arrive in the country of speculation, that the reason why the police in the United States treats black people more carefully, with more caution and more constraint as any other ethnic group is that the officers know that the media will use every black person killed by a cop as justification to feed the public their dystopian racist blue stormtroopers narrative and to demand the heads of anyone involved on a sharpened stick. And all that regardless whether the officers' actions were justified or not. Be that as it may, the raging racism in the American police force and thereof resulting overrepresentation of blacks in police killings the media are screeching about are a lie. Nothing else. Blacks are, among the people killed by the police, massively underrepresented when one takes their share of violent crimes and therefore their dangerous police encounters into account. With that, any discussion about this alleged grievance is concluded. And now we are actually only talking about rare single incidents, while the bigger tendency goes into the complete opposite direction, namely that the police doesn't treat any other ethnicity more carefully, with more caution and with more constraint than blacks. The next item on the agenda I would like to address concerns the only attempt of an objective counterargument I have heard which tries to dispute the insane high rate of crime among African Americans as reason for their higher likelihood to be killed by the police. Usually those get flat out ignored. I wonder why. Most recently brought up by our old acquaintance Mirko, also known as Mr. Knowledge to Go, in his new video. Let's take a look.
I have often read on the net that blacks do more crime than whites in the USA. True is that the relation between the percentage of blacks in the population and the share of black criminals is clearly disproportional. About half of all murders in the last year have been committed by blacks, even though the share of population is about 14.6%. In addition to that, one must also know that blacks are being exceedingly frequently unjustly convicted, that they are frequently being stopped and searched and incarcerated even if they haven't done anything. And that will then be added to the statistic. A study from the University of Michigan offers a good document in support of this. It reviewed how many people were verifiably falsely incarcerated, how many people were wrongly convicted for murder, robbery, or other offenses. The result was about 50% black people. This coincides with the conclusions of other studies. Blacks are being more frequently wrongly convicted than whites, and they are generally detained more frequently.
Mirko, I understand that you always somehow want to represent the center, and I also understand that for you, as employee of the public law media, that center has to be maybe even understandably so in accordance with not necessarily common sense, but at least roughly with the Overton window, which has currently been moved miles to the left. And that then leads you to make up this laughable non-argument as if it was the just as important other side of the medallion of black murder rate in the USA. Although you are saying that blacks are represented exactly the way one would expect compared to their crime rates. Mirko, when 50% of felonies are committed by people with a pink strand, then I would expect that 50% of the falsely convicted, assuming the justice system is fair and blind towards pink hair, are also having a slight case of magenta head. Because you could also look at it like this. Among the imprisoned blacks, there are on average roughly the same percent of innocents as there are among every other ethnicity. But you are presenting this as if it put a dent into anything. How about you play the same game with gender? The overwhelming majority of violent criminals is male. I will bet my left nut that the predominant share of falsely incarcerated are also male. And boom, we have the sexist US justice system. No other questions necessary. Anyway, there are on average about just as many innocent black people in prison than there are non-black people in there. Next question. How many people does this actually involve, according to your numbers? Yeah, dark figures, this and that, which on the other hand also includes criminals who are not locked up. So, according to your attestable numbers since 1989, I wasn't even born then, the last 31 years amount to exactly 1,292 cases. In the same crime categories as seen in your statistics, blacks committed in 2017 alone over 400,000 felonies. And in this summation, I completely disregarded the category other, because I can't know what exactly it's made up of. So I limited it only to the 5 spelled out crimes. But let's make it even more fair. Let's take out all drug-related offenses, because they don't make a big wave in your statistic, but are the lion's share in mine. Then we have in just the category murder, sexual crimes and robbery still 60,000 in 1 year, pitted against 1,300 judicial errors in 31 years. Making a projection for the same time frame gives us less than 0.1% of cases, while the categories other and drug-related crimes, which in your statistic amount to 31%, have already been taken out of my projection. One can't be more generous than that without this becoming a mockery. Error 404. Dent not found. Mirko, you're quite simply painting a faulty picture by presenting this to us in the same breath as the exorbitantly higher murder rates as the equivalent other side of the medallion. But still, congratulations to you. The prize for the best counter-argument against my observation automatically goes to you, because it's virtually the only one. And that's about it for my short refutation of the principal narrative of the media. Just like I said, I purposely kept it overly vanilla so you can send this part without a second thought to anyone who's still completely disinformed about this. The rest of the video you can watch on BitChute and Shlomo.ga. There I will go more into detail about my assessment, what the current development in the United States and its consequences for us as Germans and Europeans will be. So if you are watching this on YouTube right now, take a quick glance in the description where you will be led to the complete video. And now that we are through with the part for Aunt Frida, I want to get something off my chest. For starters, addressing the kind of people who now want to put me in the dock, demanding a justification for me, daring to show solid data concerning a central topic, because of which half of America is reduced to rubble, and an affidavit that I'm not one of the evil racists the TV warned them about, in the shape of all these numbers adjusting to make them fit comfortably into their flowery worldview-like farce of an explanation of all socioeconomic factors and systemic disadvantages, whatever the fuck that even means. To these people I have 2 things to say. Firstly, I'm neither here to explain these numbers, nor is it in any way relevant concerning the questions we are debating here. Also, I wouldn't be qualified to do so anyway. If you want answers regarding that, go ask a few economists, biologists and sociologists who would like to lose their jobs. Or some who don't want that. But the problem there is that the latter will only be able to give you one answer. I'm here to expose the, in the media, undisputed omnipresent lie of a racist white power police in the US who like to murder black people, because of whom people's businesses and houses are being torched, and others straight up die. And to answer the question why are blacks overrepresented among the casualties of law enforcement, the reason why the rate of crime among blacks is so astronomically high is irrelevant. Here I can only tell you one thing. The magical word of socioeconomic factors is insufficient by far. Because, and this is quite simple, there are way more poor whites than blacks in absolute numbers, and still they only commit a fraction of the same crimes. And secondly, who the fuck do you think you are? The Thought Inquisition? Did the Batman show you data, which, even though completely accurate and dead relevant, often comes from bad boo-boo man, and does he now therefore have to prove that he isn't dabbling in wrong thing? Go hang yourself, you wretched psychotic sewer rats. Furthermore, I'm a Jew, so I might actually be allowed to bring this up in your disgusting, by complexes corroded, creeping creature world. Thanks. One can hire me to do this, by the way, directly at my new company Rent a Jew. I will then for you in real life say potentially incorrect words and truths, which you as perpetrator race are no longer allowed to say. Somewhat like this.
Hell no, that ain't cool, dude. Where my money? I need my money right now.
You don't have to be talking to me like that.
Bimbo, nigga. I don't know what's going on, but you need to have my money right now. Empty your pockets, get my money right now.
Well, I thought we were cool. Why are you tripping?
Nigga.
But I also wanted to generally address how I rate the current situation in the United States. To get the first thing off the agenda. The case of George Floyd represents abuse of power. And that's why the police officer who killed him is being completely justly charged with manslaughter and third-degree murder, which is pretty much manslaughter with a ribbon on it. In a normal world, that would then be the end of the story. But not in a world in which the media propagandistically fuels all conflicts involving different races.
The media, who was apparently obsessed to conjure up a situation like the one the states are in right now, and who continue their one-sided agitation with any dead black person completely disregarding the circumstances. All that while they skillfully ignore anything I mentioned in this video. By the way, one could just as easy, if not even easier, use this procedure to mislead into the opposite direction as well. Just imagine every single time a white person gets killed by a black person, which happens exorbitantly more often than the other way around, there would be a nationwide headline also accompanied with boiling tear ducts and thundering cries of war. In America, we can now witness how it can look like when the demographic bomb fueled by the media starts to actually explode. Pretty much the wet dream of nice people like Brandon Tarrant. And I fear that we here in Germany are looking over the great pond into our own future in 20, optimistically 30 years. Oh, and a pretty tame version of it, because as far as I know, African Americans don't have a central religious dogma, no book with a claimed universal validity that teaches morals, philosophy and worldviews which radically oppose the ones of other people, which are deeply culturally and spiritually ingrained in the majority of its followers. And they aren't being taught from an early age that the from this dogma deviating majority society is worse than cattle. No. The blacks in America, as always, hashtag not all, but hashtag still enough that half of the US is reduced to rubble, are just racial tribalists force-fed decades of propaganda claiming that they are the poor little rejected, degraded and humiliated victim, and they are now slowly but surely out for blood. The same propaganda is also force-fed to our troublesome minority, and that will then lead to the same outcome or worse. I guarantee it. Everything that is left for me to say is, let's keep trying to be the voice of reason. Don't let us give in to the same warmongering, but let us level-headedly expose the lies of the mainstream, the fruit of which America is reaping right now. A fruit that we will have to taste sooner than one would like. Well, and let's hope for the best. And that should be all. Depressing doesn't even begin to describe it. Nonetheless, let's keep our chin up. Take care, friends. Be seeing you in the honeycomb.
Wow, that was a bitch to translate. Those goddamn Jews and their converging diametrically opposing conclusions in proportion to their exorbitantly complicated propaganda exposing sentences, which are obviously edited together. Anyway, his channel as well as the link to the livestream Honeycomb he's a part of are linked below. All in German, I'm afraid. If you do speak the language though, do subscribe to him. Oh, and he doesn't know I'm doing this. He probably doesn't even know I exist. Though I did leave a comment in his BitChute comment section telling him that I'm gonna steal his work. It's the polite thing to do, especially since I cut his intro. Anyway, back to Conan.
When the local prosecutor came forward and charged only one of the officers with third-degree murder, it's like the most horrific crime of the century recorded for the whole world. And you get third-degree murder? I'm an attorney. I've never heard of third-degree murder.
Third-degree murder is manslaughter. For murder 1 and 2, you need intent, which then has to be proven in court. Manslaughter could have been proven, but from what I've heard, they now bumped up the charges to murder 2, which basically means that he goes free because the charges won't stick. And what do you think the writers will do then? There's always worse, trust me.
I do think we have to look at the fact that a lot of people who vote for Democrats, who support causes, who share all the right stuff on their Instagram page and all that sort of stuff, you know, to be honest, don't have a lot of personal black friends, don't have a lot of personal skin in the game, don't hire a lot of African Americans, don't have African American lawyers or accountants or dentists or, you know, places where the black community does have a lot of professionals stacked up.
Don't have a lot of personal black friends? Friendships should happen naturally and not according to a diversity quota. Don't hire enough African Americans? How about they hire the best person for the job? But I'll also get to that later.
And listen to some of those young kids talk about how, I mean, those kids are so heartbreaking. I just want to be able to go to a white neighborhood and not feel afraid.
Not being afraid in a white neighborhood? The numbers don't back that up, which our Jewish friends just showed us.
Who knows? I mean, that guy that got killed, and he might have cured cancer for all we know. We don't know who the heck that guy was or what his kids could have become or whatever. Right. So we're wasting some genius. We're missing out on some possible best friends we've ever had and some possible great employees or employers or contractors or neighbors.
We definitely are wasting some genius. Like the white guy who misses out on his Harvard education because even though he's smarter than the black guy who got accepted, he doesn't get in because Harvard has an African American race bonus. You see how this hurts us in the long run, don't you? But yeah, enough of you. Let's continue Wednesday.
I think a lot of us are feeling protests are fine, but what can we do?
Protests are fine? No, they're not. The African American community was hit the hardest by the CCP virus. And these protests are a great way to spread it. So why are these people protesting again? Oh, right, to virtue signal, of course.
Right now, a lot of white people are frozen by the, I don't know what to do, so I'll do nothing. And that's why black people get brutalized by police officers over and over again.
Wrong, but we've already been over this.
But how are you going to follow up on this 3, 6, 9 weeks from now, next year, the year after that, to make America what it should be?
Make America what it should be? Well, what should it be? There is no end to your madness. But I've stolen and translated another video for you. Here you go. What's the matter? It doesn't say only Black Lives Matter. And that from the same people. Exactly the same people who go to the barricades if you leave out the asterisk and a female ending to every word, because that excludes people categorically. Or if a job offer only addresses male and female and not also diverse, whatever that is supposed to be. And the other way around, it definitely is in any case racism. But why? It doesn't say only white lives matter. You do know exactly what the problem with Black Lives Matter is. When the tables are turned, you are the very first to make a fuss. Whoever intentionally tries to look stupid has an agenda. And here we haven't even talked about the numbers which are supposed to be the basis of BLM, but those get my attention at the end of the video. This is starting to look like an epidemic to me. The affected people during the era of colonialism didn't lamentate as much as the allegedly affected people of today. Wherever you look, racism everywhere. The new TV spot for the Volkswagen Golf angered many people. These are the 4 things that can be interpreted in a racist way. A dark-skinned man is being pushed around by a white hand. The users commented about this. In the new commercial, a black man is being completely coincidentally being pushed by a white hand. Hey, Volkswagen! Short question. Why have you made such a racist commercial? One thing I'm not completely clear on. How do you know that this hand belongs to a white person? Maybe that individual comes from the Far East? And how were they supposed to make it better? You are the ones who always demand that all the different ethnicities appear in media. If they don't appear, they aren't represented, because racism. Do they appear? Then it's racism, because racism. Though portraying blacks as if they are naturally scared of math, that even I find a bit degrading and racially chauvinistic, dear Green Party. If it had been the other way around, then you would have said, why are you only showing the white man and don't represent the black community with a face? And that there's only the hand of the black man, which symbolizes manual labor, proves that the blacks are nothing more than cheap labor to you, equals slavery, equals racism. We have to understand that we are dealing here with completely mentally degenerated people, with people who themselves don't know what they actually want. You can't appease the left when it comes to racism. And all this insanity under the premise that something like racists don't even exist. One would assume that something like racism comes from race and describes the discrimination in relation to it, except when we are talking about whites. These can, by definition, not be victims of racism. Now I would like to know, dear West German broadcast, at what point one can be called white? Is Obama still white enough for your racism term? Is there some documentation in support of this, or do you define it at your discretion in cooperation with the Antonio Amadeus Foundation? If potentially affected are seeing racism everywhere, then I can't even hold it against them to an extent. I know it myself. To not be fooled by this construct of allegedly structural racism, especially as potentially affected person inside this narrative, one needs a cool head and a self-confident personality. Otherwise, you'll think because of every minor thing, beginning with looks up to the question where you're from, that has to be racism. And the fault doesn't lie with the affected person and not with the one asking. The fault lies with the current zeitgeist in the Western world, which in relation to race collectively permanently defines one side as victims and the others as perpetrators, collectively and permanently. Racism is an invention of the left, a tale where the white is always the evildoer and the black is always the innocent.
The whole Black Lives Matter movement is therefore only based on nothing else than a media agenda. The story which ascended with the case of George Floyd is the cherry on top of the cake, which is the foundation the left has built their existence on. The politically left existence in the Western world is dependent on the blacks not emancipating themselves out of the role of the victim of the evil white man. The case of George Floyd is for Black Lives Matter and the left only a pawn sacrifice. They need this construct of the permanently oppressed minority as their ultimate right to exist, no matter how things really are. For the rate of people killed by the police, it's not the share of the population that's relevant, but the amount of the perpetrators. It doesn't matter how many casualties there are in relation to the population. Instead, those have to be compared to how many dangerous encounters with the police the perpetrators put themselves in, and how often do they resist police authority. Otherwise, following that logic, you would have to protest for male lives matter because the overwhelming majority of the suspects, accused, incarcerated, falsely convicted, and the casualties of the police are men. And with that, the relation to their share of population is all the way blown out of proportion. But nobody cares about that, because men in general aren't suited all that well for the victim role in the eyes of our media educators. And considering all that, blacks are not just not disproportionately overrepresented among the people killing by the police, but in fact disproportionately underrepresented if you take into account their share of committed crimes. Only because someone isn't carrying a weapon according to the official definition doesn't mean he isn't dangerous at all. But Pharaohs, there's a reason why so many blacks in America are becoming criminals. First of all, this is, if at all, the step afterwards. At the very beginning is the realization that this is actually the case. Secondly, pedagogues and sociologists can fight over the causes all they want, but the politicians are obligated to react to the current reality. And thirdly, a question, the answer which I'm still curious about, wherein lies the causality between sociological precarious circumstances and a committed sexual assault? Because blacks are also in this observation in the US disproportionately overrepresented in relation to their share of population. Maybe the time has come to consider new theories, and this time without leftist ideological premises like all people are the same, therefore inequality in the reality must have been caused by social injustice. These failed explanation attempts to describe the reality should be abandoned. And this is the reality I'm talking about. The number of white people killed by blacks is many times higher than the other way around. That the media doesn't care about. Blacks also kill many times more police officers than police officers kill black people. That the media doesn't care about either. Black people are killed more often by another black person than by anything else. Here, this skyscraper never gave Black Lives Matter any cause to protest. And that exposes your movement as pure Münchhausen syndrome by proxy, for which you paint whites always as the villain and the blacks always as innocent victims. Is a black guy killed by a white guy, then he's the victim. If a black guy kills a white guy, then he's also the victim because the structurally racist majority society made him do it. According to the current narrative of the media, non-white people can't be responsible for their actions, much less perpetrator. The accusation of structural racism comes with the burden of proof and has to be substantiated with arguments. At any rate, the hitherto existing facts deprive the current new left anti-racism movement of any kind of foundation for this, just so we are clear.
He also comes highly recommended. Here's his channel. Just like with the Jew, go subscribe.
If you're personally like, you know what, we don't have enough black people on this show in high positions, so I'm going to make sure we go out and find those people, and I'm going to put out a call for this. I don't have enough black people in my personal life that I'm employing or taking advice from. I'm going to change that.
If business owners don't hire a black person who's clearly the best for the job, they hurt themselves. Now, if a particular African American isn't the best guy for the job, do you still think he should be hired?
I mean, the phrase Black Lives Matter is intentionally provocative. It was a phrase that was created by three black women, Opal Tometi, Alicia Garza, and Patrisse Cullors, in the wake of the Trayvon Martin murder by George Zimmerman. And it was a declaration of like, we need people to know Black Lives Matter.
Actually, African American lives don't matter to Black Lives Matter activists. If they did, they would care about that most dead black people were killed by other black people, or that with their protesting, they're spreading the CCP virus, which affects black communities the most.
So that it's an intentionally provocative phrase, and here's why. Because Martin Luther King's "Let's Hug It Out" didn't work.
Intentionally provocative? Like, marching through the streets chanting, "We want dead cops"? Yeah, they did that about 3 years ago.
The fact is, all lives don't matter the same.
Yeah, that's why blacks are underrepresented in police shootings, but every one of these cases is way, way overrepresented in the media.
We need white people to talk to each other about this. There's great organizations out there, Surge, Showing Up for Racial Justice, which is a white-led racial justice organization where white people meet with each other. Because a lot of times you need to have these awkward conversations with each other when you're not afraid of what black folks are going to say or overhear. So white people need to do this work. Actually, right now, Conan, I'm going to assign you a friend of mine to be in charge of your whiteness.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, here we go.
I want my assignment. I really do.
I didn't come here just to talk. I'm giving you homework. So
Okay.
give your kids the autobiography of Malcolm X. You read it too if you haven't read it. And it's not, you can't just watch the movie. The movie's great, but read the autobiography of Malcolm X. And a friend of mine named Kate Schatz, who's a white woman who wrote the book Rad American Women A to Z, deals with white people all the time about how to deal with this work. So Kate Schatz, she's on Twitter, I'll hook you guys up later, is now in charge of Conan O'Brien's whiteness.
Okay. Well, and also, I'm not just white. I am so white that we're going to have to live together.
Okay, that's fine.
This is a 24/7 job being in
Yes.
charge.
Being in charge of your whiteness? Are you fucking kidding me? So, this guy is either saying someone has to take care of your racism, Conan, implying that you are in fact a racist, or he's saying there's something fundamentally wrong with you because of your skin color. Well, color me impressed, but that is some demeaning shit right there. And you just go along with it, nodding, grinning, ha 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 ha, funny. Well, maybe you think that that isn't disgustingly insulting, but I dare anyone to say that to me. I double dare you, motherfucker, to quote a famous scene starring a black man.
So even the fact that the election of Barack Obama, the system's response was Donald Trump.
Yes.
And that happens through not just like because Trump is a bloviating sort of like soundbite machine and people like that. It's because through gerrymandered districts, through the electoral college not valuing the popular vote, the system has controls in place for things to be more inclusive and more equitable.
Trump's response, the electoral college, that's a whole other can of worms. Trump won because people hate Hillary, feminism, identity politics. People don't want that. They still don't. The electoral college might look unjust at first, but it benefits everyone if farmers don't lose their water supply so they can grow food because the majority in the city wants it for themselves. And if you don't like that, why don't you move to a Republican state? That would even things out, wouldn't it? Okay, gerrymandering is bad. Nobody's saying that the Republicans are all that good either, but at least they aren't batshit crazy like the Democrats are these days.
When you bring up white supremacy, obviously people go right to neo-Nazi, fascism. They go to an extreme rather than understanding that, yes, anyone who says the skids haven't been greased for white people in this country is a moron.
I'd be careful with the moron accusations after being so acceptingly told that you need someone in charge of your whiteness. But seriously, the way the racism of the past manifests the most is in the vicious circle of poverty black people are in. Though this has nothing to do with the cops, because as our Jewish friend pointed out, poor white people still do way less crime than poor black people. But be that as it may, today, with the media portraying blacks always as the victim and diversity quotas putting less qualified people into positions they shouldn't be in, I wouldn't just say that black people are at a disadvantage, I'd say we all are. Though I get to that in part 2 of this.
This incident happens and then...
Oh wait, June 4th, Sam Richardson.
Then suddenly everyone's asking you, how do you feel? And educate me, which is exhausting and not your job. It's not your job to educate us. It's our job to educate ourselves.
If it's your job to educate yourself, why don't you do it? I recommend this Tim Pool fella to you. He has now 3 or 4 channels on YouTube and puts out multiple videos daily. He's part Asian, so he has a great work ethic. Anyway, let's continue. June 8th, Mayor Melvin.
Last night, many demonstrations have been about the police. And I'm sure you have very strong opinions. There's people out there that there's a big movement to defund the police. And I would imagine that, like many things, it's complicated. It's probably a very complicated question when you hear about defunding the police. There are many people, including myself, who don't really know what that means.
Defunding the police force isn't necessary. You've already completely demoralized them. Many have already resigned. But not to worry, it's not like an absent police force is gonna hurt the black community the most. And on June 10th, Senator Cory Booker was doing so well the first 10 minutes, but then he had to bring up Uncle Donald.
His willingness to so cavalierly deny so many Americans human dignity, for him to trample upon the very humanity of other Americans, to cheapen this nation by working so hard to divide us and to make us hate each other.
Trump doesn't divide you, the left does. Or to quote a white guy who ended up with a black voice, if you aren't with me, you are my enemy.
He may have the title of the office, but the title doesn't make the man has to make the title. And he has been a failure in a moral office that Republicans from Lincoln to Democrats like Obama, who have led with love for their country, with malice towards none, and with charity towards all.
Obama led with love? The deporter-in-chief? The man who bombed multiple countries? Who let the NSA violate everyone's privacy around the world? The guy who greenlit drone strikes, killing people without due process. Civilians, children among them. Don't make me laugh. Instead, free Julian Assange. Now, Trump being a failure isn't completely wrong, but it's also not completely true. This is just Trump derangement syndrome.
You know, I talked to a college friend of mine whose kid was at Lafayette Park when he stormed in, had people storm in with rubber bullets and tear gas, and the anguish that somebody would think in this sacred capital, where people from the March on Washington to Second Amendment rights, people have come for generations to peacefully petition their government, and he just tramples that for what? A national security issue because he had to urgently get someone? No, but to hold up a book that he should read.
Yeah, half-truth. If you're tired of being lied to, why not watch Tim Pool right here on YouTube? He always shows his sources, and should he get something wrong, he corrects himself. That's integrity right there. I highly recommend him. Go subscribe. All the links down in the description.
I have not wanted to do Trump jokes or make it all about Donald Trump because ultimately I find him very uninteresting and his actions sadden me. But I'm angry. I reserve my anger for people that enable him.
Do you think what you're doing there isn't working in his favor? But I get to that in the second part.
And I get very angry at people who do know better, who are in a party that may be in the short term benefiting from the fact that he holds that office. But in the long term, I don't know how they're going to be able to talk to their kids or their grandchildren.
Bringing up the kids and grandchildren. Great move. I'm sure your kids are so proud of you supporting this on national television. I mean, I sure am proud of what my grandfather did. But I connect that for you in part 3. I just hope I get it all out before America completely destroys itself while the good people are standing by, doing nothing out of fear of being called a bad word. You're supposed to be that big history buff, Conan. I really expected you to be smarter than this. Harvard and all. Well, let's just hope you just don't know what's really going on.
All right, let's move on to the next little bit of fun. All over the country, statues of Confederate generals and other controversial historical figures are being removed. You've heard about this. They're being removed, or sometimes they're being torn down. Now, most people are really glad to finally see some of these statues gone, but not everybody's on board. One of those people is joining me via satellite. Please welcome the Bob's Big Boy statue.
Oh, hey, hi Conan. Hello.
Controversial? When you said that word to me 4 years ago, I didn't really know what it meant. but I've looked it up since then and I do have to disagree. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, controversial historical figures? Well, since you support tearing down their statues...
No. This whole movement isn't about statues, but about what kind of people the statues represent.
Because of what they represent? Will you also come out in support of destroying what these men stood for? All this doesn't make sense to me. Here you call people lemmings because they're out protesting during the CCP virus epidemic?
Oh God, no. It's a herd of lemmings mindlessly following their leader off a cliff.
And here you are, yet again, nodding and grinning while he's telling you that the Black Lives Matter protests are spreading the disease.
I want to talk about this right away because it's so important and inspiring. Tell us what that fund is.
It's basically a fund for protesters who are out on the front lines fighting in this, what I call the uprising for our justice and equality. And in the midst of our pandemic and putting the risks in their bodies on the line, some of them being in communities that are already at high risk.
This is what the far left does. First they create the problem by virtue signaling, and then they pretend to solve the problem by even more virtue signaling. They should really adopt the Ouroboros as their symbol. I mean, the serpent is also often seen as a symbol of deceit, so it really fits. But more about that in the second part. Until then, to quote another famous black character, give my regards to Schlansky.